After 6 years of work and over 21 videos documenting every step, I've condensed the entire journey of building John Wilding's tower clock into just over 50 minutes. From raw materials to a fully functioning clock, this is the complete build. Every key moment, every challenge, and the final result. Let's take a look at the full process in this one video.
Just faced up the end, all nice. So I've mounted them all on the mill, and then finished them all to the same height. So I know. Okay, so I've got these to round. Finish is pretty chronic. Just personally think it looks a little bit more modern, but maybe I'm wrong there. Yeah, M6 bolts are going to go into. Okay, so here are all the pillars, all finished off. Okay, so there's the pillars in position. They're not screwed up yet, so nice. How well that's gone for such a long length, and having to cutting the cross frames now, the long lengths. Okay, so this is where I've got up to tonight. I've managed to screw the two cross members across. Okay, so I've drilled and reamed all the holes now, and basically I'm cutting my little pins and polishing the top of those pins as best I can, and then I'm using some Loctite. I'm using Loctite 603. But it's a really nice fit. It's a bit difficult to do with one hand, but there you go. There you go, fitted on quite nice. Well, that's the frames all pinned on both sides. So that's the barrel arbor, roughed out to size. I've just been holding that in the 3-jaw chuck on the main part, and I'm going to start turning it between centres now. It's proper diameter. Well, I did this bit off camera, half because I had low charge, quite nice length of beech from a local supplier. This piece of beech now is going to become the barrel. So there's the beech, roughly. Okay. Okay, so this is the next day. I've epoxied the arbor. Okay, so I've just finished the arbor and the barrel. There's the finished barrel and arbor. This is the main wheel, and it's the bit that I'm most nervous about, primarily because this is a huge chunk of brass and quite expensive. I think this bit alone costs about £40.
Okay, so normally I'd take it off for the video, but I've tightened it all nicely up, and I must admit I've got it really nice and flush and tight. Okay, so I've got a problem. Well, I know we're only early into the project, but I've had my first moment of sadness. In fact, it's almost invisible. It's actually easier to see on camera. You can actually see a change in colour in real life, but you can see. The moment of truth. Okay, so that's the ratchet wheel all finished off now. The main wheel sat on the barrel and barrel arbor. Obviously I need to screw this all up, but it's looking good so far. Okay, thanks for watching. See you next time. And we'll take a look at this now. There we go. Again, this is CZ120 brass, just to remind you. So that's why it cuts so cleanly and so well. I doubt very much you get this result with sticky brass. And there you go. That to me looks pretty damn good. In fact, it looks excellent for a cut disc. So there you go. Really quick, really nice way of getting some brass discs.
Yeah, that was about the 1992, 93.
Okay, so nice simple bit of turning for the barrel end cap. Okay, so we've got the end cap on now. Just need to purchase some slightly smaller screws. Okay, let's get going. That centre is bang on 1/2 inch. So we're going to lock this down on here and then turn it to 3 inch on the lathe. So off camera, I've gone and started parting so that this fits on, and I kind of knew this would happen. So it slides on, and then I've got that as a really nice fit. So that's absolutely perfect. It just slips on, so you can see it goes in that groove and then locked perfectly in that groove. So I couldn't have got it any better. However, of course, there's always a however. I'm not going to move it. I'm not going to show you now, but there's not enough gap in between there for the main wheel and for the ratchet wheel. So you can see now, basically with the ratchet wheel on and with the main wheel on, that my groove, even though it's the right size, isn't perfectly located. I never expected it to be, so I'm going to have to just bring that out ever so much. Okay, a little bit of a fast forward, but that's the slip washer now on and in place. It is domed ever so slightly just to get a tight fit, but it does slide off. I need 2 hands to do that. But that's the slip washer now in place.
Okay, so slow progress of the click, I should say. And next we're going to look at actually designing this. And he actually says in the book there, I've got my M5 hole mat and I've just drawn on one of the teeth profiles. And that distance there is roughly 1.125, so 1 1/8. Okay, so that's the click drawn on a sheet of gauge plate. I was going to actually use the template, stick it on and cut it around, but ping.
It's off now. Because we're doing the ball 5.
No, okay. Sorry. So she's all right.
Okay, so there's a piece of steel it came out of, and there is the final click. It just needs.
I don't know. Watson are going to revel in this.
Outside for a minute, and I'm really pleased with that. It polished up well. In actual fact, I did the final polish off camera. I've done it before, and it's going to be cut from roughly 4mm, just under actually 3.5mm brass, and it's going to be cut from flat. Okay. 3 3/4 inch former, and we'll see how it goes. I don't know how easy it's going to be to bend. Okay, I can tell you now, very easy. Very easy indeed. Place, spring definitely needs polishing up and finishing, but ultimately now it works. So you can see that you're going to get a nice click back down on that spring, and okay, so it's hole 1 done. We come back over here, push forward. Now I do should lock that down, but I always find the step. Also tapped these slotted holes for the bearings, or for the bushes I should say. So the next thing is now that this wheel can now slide in underneath now, I can basically lift it and slot into position, and I can then take my bearings and I can slide those in place. Position. Nicely freely spinning. It's quite heavy, it's got a big brass wheel on there. Look. Okay, so this brass, I didn't pay as much for it. It was classed as engravers brass, but I don't think it's quite as leaded. It's definitely not cutting quite as well, but it is cutting, so we'll see how it goes. coming towards the end of the cut now. That's the first one off the CNC machine, and so let's see if that works. There we go. There's our part. Over the years, so thankfully I've managed to pick this up a few years ago. Okay, so these are the final cut pieces, and they've come out quite nicely. I'll just give them a little polish, nothing. We're just gauging out the depth now for the cutout, where the pins are going to go. Okay, so I've shaped this all up. I'm just going to part it off now. Bored the hole down the middle and reamed it out. So we're just using the divider now to do 20 holes. Okay, so there's the lantern pinion blank. These are the blue pivot steel. And then we're just going round and gluing them in, and then we'll cut them all off and tidy up the top. Well, that was an interesting experience. So the problem with these is perhaps I shouldn't have pinned them first, actually, if I was doing them again. Just because when I'm trying to drill it, these only fit in from one side, the bushes only fit in from one side, and therefore there's no flat surface to drill from. So just mucked up this piece of wood with a couple of holes in, and then they've set push fit in there, and then drilled them on the drill press. So it's all worked okay. So I need to tap these now and then expand the whole lantern pinion. And just the lantern pinion isn't actually on there, it's just free running, and I've got nice depth in with the main wheel. And I'm just coming now to the point where we're actually I've got to clean this up obviously, but I'm just coming to the point now where I've got to depth this and also position the lantern pinion now. Okay, so that's the first arbor now complete. Appreciate I've not done as much video on this, but other than turning the lantern pinion, there wasn't much to it really. It's just here where I've got to align the apron. This central small hole here, I've got to align with this larger hole here, and it needs to be spot on, because once it's aligned, then these 4 holes here will then need drilling onto the pillow, and there's not much space there. When I built it, I have measured out, so in theory it should align. It looks like it does when you place one over the other, but I want to make sure that they align perfectly. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to turn down a little like a little spigot, basically with that diameter, and then a tiny little nub at the top that just fits into there, so I can slot it all down on top of each other. I can get this nice and square then with the rest of the frame, and then mark out for the 4 holes. So that's what we're going to do now. Okay, so there's the finished plug. Put a little bit of a taper on so it sits in there nicely. And then we can get the apron and fit that on. So we know it's nicely central now. And then use our square. So this has worked out quite nicely, and they are perfectly aligned from the back there, and it's been so long, literally a year, more than a year since actually planning all this and doing it. Okay, so these are the final standoffs. Each one has been threaded,
5mm for the top, 4mm on all of them at the bottom. The two smaller ones are 3mm, and then 4mm on the top side. And then I've had to put in, because I've not done hex bar, I've had to put in a little Tommy bar just so I can tighten them up properly, nice and neatly into the frame. So let's install them now and see how they look. So there's the backcock apron, and I've managed to secure this nicely in position now. I keep going on about this, but I need to change all the screws, just machine screws, just to hold it together. Fine, it did work out okay with the M3 screws in the frame, so it all nicely aligned. So I'm quite happy with that. I'm just using the burnisher now, just to polish it up. So I don't know how. So I'm just putting together now the arbor for the pallet and turn this down. So I've just turned down the bottom end and polished it up, and then that slides through and locate. Okay, so we've got this all in G-code. Just made a little bit of an error because camera died. So I had a 2mm cutter in just to do those two pockets on either side of the pallet. Just for the pallets, I should say. Okay, so we're going to go for this now. Got it on nice and slow. Let's go. Well, that's how it's come out. Definitely needs a heck of a clean up. But I think a lot of this is just burrs on the surface, quite sharp. So, okay, so these are the parts cleaned up. Sort that out after and I'll show you why. I've made a bit of an error here. When I've done the pocketing toolpath, without full explanation, how I drew it was two rectangles here just to make up this piece and do some measurements from. I've accidentally taken the lower, smaller one, thankfully though in a way, because the cutout isn't long enough. Basically it needs to be that much longer. So I think we're going to file this down now. So I'll mark it out and then we'll try and file it down.
I wonder if old Dr. Spurs comes out of the weekend.
Oh, you know that. You know that.
They go to Gaz, he's a Man City fan, not Gaz.
Okay, Merry Christmas.
How are you, Gaz? Good? Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Dad.
It's a bit early, mate. It's the 20th of November.
So that's where we're up to. Yes, so we're basically going to try and bend it round and then, oh, it's moving easy. Oh, that's really nice. I wasn't expecting that. I'm going to have to file down the grooves for the pallets a little bit. So I'm going to cut that out and then get a nice fit, and then we'll actually make the pallets. I'm getting there now. Okay, so that's both sides in now. That's a nice tight fit on that side. Slightly looser fit on this side, but
I'll take it.
Yeah, me too. Grey hairs. I don't want to be done.
yeah, strip that I need to cut.
I try to street and separate in terms of that, which typically suggests that.
So there it is. So now we're going to mark out for the pallets, which is. So I've popped round to my dad's this morning, who's far better at technical drawings than me, and he's produced this from the plans in Wilding's book, and then I've just taken this home, put it on to scale, and then use the ruler to find the angles that's required for the pallets, and I've just marked those or scribed those on the pallets, as you can see. Okay, so there's the pallets cut to size.
And now we need to harden them, and then we'll cut them back a little bit more still. I just wanted to get the initial shape of them, but it's looking good so far.
And then, you know, they're going to have good moments, but well, the final catches shot into the ground so finally in the end zone, Crutch, he flies straight, and the Forest goalkeeper Matt Selby get now.
Okay, so the pallets are all in and nicely polished. Focus. Can't focus on that one properly, but they're all nicely and polished. Okay, so a good fit on there. I'm going to turn this down now on the back side. That's going to screw in, and then we'll part off. The only thing I now need to do is ream through so that we've got a good fit on the pallet arbor. Okay, so here's the final parts for the pallet. We've got the pallet frame all assembled. All needs a bit of a polish. We've got the pallets in and in position, so I didn't want to disassemble them for this final bit of the video. We've then got the collet, which screws in here. So we've got the collet on there as well. And we'll get that screwed in now. Okay, so there it is, all moving nice and freely. So we're going to move on now to the pendulum. Okay, so that's how they've come off the router. So just get rid of those tabs now, get them out and then clean them up. Okay, so these are the crutch parts, half cleaned up. And then we've just cut out some 1/4 inch bar, brass bar, by 1/4 inch as well to make these little cubes. Drilled and tapped that M3, and they're going to be soft soldered onto the end here. Not much experience soft soldering brass, so this could be a disaster. So let's have a... So I've got some EN3B steel. This is 3-inch steel, and this is going to make the pendulum, and it's also going to make the weight as well. Certainly a fair old chunk to get through. Been polishing this up. It's just a little mark in it there. I think I'm going to have to live with that because it's quite deep and I don't want to take any more off it. So yeah, it's looking good. So I'll take that out now. I was just finishing it off, just using a pressure fitting there, so I could get right down really thin finishing cuts, and then obviously sanding it down to the polish.
An essential item that we just take for granted, so many of us.
Okay, we're going to work on the suspension spring now. So I've got the suspension spring here, which is 0.008 of an inch, and I'm going to make the brass cheeks. So I've cut a little piece of brass here from the brass sheet, and we're going to anneal this and then bend it into a tight U shape. So we Okay, so this is a little punch I've made out of some old silver steel, and it's 3mm, just over, so it'll slide in the 3.5mm hole that I've made. So we're just going to heat treat this now, get this really red hot, and then quench it. So that's quite nice using the punch. I've literally knocked out a little circle there, you can see. Seems to cut alright first time round with them. That's not bad. Fairly clean cut. Okay, so we've got a square bar now for the backcock, chucked up in the 4-jaw lathe and centred. So we're just going to turn a small nub down on the end, and then that'll fit through the apron, and then we're going to drill and tap that M4. So I've just turned that down and fitted the apron, so it's nice and square. And I think like I say, I'm going off Wilding's plans here, so Wilding wants you to rivet this in, and I really don't like that, so when I've got it in position, I'm going to Loctite it and then screw it in as well. Maybe it's just me, I just wasn't confident in getting a good fit riveting. So we'll take this out now, we'll cut it down to size, we'll face the other side back up, I'll do that off camera, and then we need to slot this. Well, I've gone off plan a little bit now for the pendulum, rod. So at the top end, there's still this brass piece that I've fitted up, which slides on to the other end of the pendulum rod. So in actual fact, I've extended the pendulum rod as much as that brass piece would extend it by, and then I've just threaded the end here. I'm just going to Loctite this into position. Okay, one step closer. So the pendulum's on now and swinging freely. Well, which is now, after all those years of building it, finally getting a bit of a tick-tock. It needs a lot of adjustments, and I've got something slipping up here. I've got the crutch arm slipping a little bit. Needs to be set in beat, but that's literally just a tiny little bit of fettling, and it does seem to be running. Ooh, it's lost. It's died. Well, they were the initial beats anyway. This is where we're at now, and this is after probably about 3 days of tinkering each night. Every time it's still running. It runs overnight and runs during the day, but the movement just still isn't correct. So I've dropped the entire frame. I've taken some of the angle off that entry pallet. Don't know whether you can notice that compared to the first videos. Maybe that's still too steep. It feels like all that's happening still is that it's hitting on the impulse face on both sides. Still hitting just on the entry, but it's running, and it's running quieter, and I've dropped the frame. And of course the obvious answer is to push the pallets in further, and immediately just binds up. That's as good as you can get it. Honestly, move those pallets either one by just a millimetre, or less than that, fraction of a millimetre, and it immediately binds. We've got our steel frame all now constructed. Hope it's strong enough. We'll find out very shortly. And I've just got the temporary base plate, so just out some ply, set up on the CNC router, just to try and make a base plate that's going to drop on the top of this. I've ordered some maple, which will make the final base plate, so this is just a temporary go. Come off the router table. Needs a bit of work now cleaning it up. So this is one of the slow motors. It's a 24 RPM motor. And I was worried it wasn't going to have enough torque. It's about 25 pounds. But this is nicely picking up the weight that I'm going to be using on this clock. And it doesn't seem to have any problem with it. This is the next step now, to try and mount this on the clock and see if we can get it going. One interesting thing to point out, the motor's stopped now, and on other people's designs I've seen, they have had to put a ratchet onto the motor because it basically disengages and drops down when the motor's off. But this seems to be holding just fine. Maybe that'll become apparent later on, but at the moment this seems fine. So not even going to worry about a ratchet to hold it in place. So we've gone ahead and got the bigger sprocket gear fitted, and the clock is now running again. He still needs a touch more weight, but to be fair, it did before, so
pretty happy with that. And now this is the layout for the chain that I was talking about. Goes up there, down to the counterweight, which is literally just keeping the line taut. It's not even a counterweight, it's just keeping the chain taut. And then back up and over. Okay, so we're here again now trying to sort out the electronics for the auto winding. And we've got here a relay. We've got an 8-pin relay, and it's 20 volt DC coil and AC 220 volt rated contacts. We've also got 2 identical switches. So this switch here is a proximity sensor. It's 24 DC again. It's proximity sensor, and we've got normally open. And we've also got another one which is normally closed. And then we've also got our power supply as well, which is 24 volts. And then we'll see in a minute, we'll wire this so that hopefully we've got a safer 24 volts going through the switches and the 220 volts going to the motor. Okay, we're going to be a little bit more careful now because we've got our AC lamp, our mains voltage lamp plugged in place of the motor. Yet we've still got 24 volts DC running through the switches. And when we come close to the start, our lamp comes on. And when we come over to the stop, our lamp goes off. So this is a much safer system now. I'll be honest with you, I didn't show it on camera, but the original setup that I originally bought was all AC. And then I realised that I wasn't quite happy with mains voltage running through the more exposed switches. This way, the mains voltage will just be running through the relay, which will be enclosed in a box. And then the more exposed switches will be running the DC current. But this is all working now quite nicely. So we've just got to get this mounted to the clock, and obviously we've got to get this connected to the motor. We will bring up the start, and there we go, we've set that off. Come back up, we can see the motor now driving. Come back a little bit, we'll see the weight being brought up. Lovely auto wind system in that force, even though the weight's going up, the force is still acting down on that main wheel, and therefore the clock is still ticking, no problem. And then when this, I mean, there are extension blocks anyway, added weight, but when the main weight or those extension blocks come near to that stop, it will stop. Okay, so here are the parts for the Takeoff arbor. Got obviously the arbor itself. We've got 2 collars. We've got the pinion that I've cut. And then we've got these 2 slip washers as well. So we've got this domed triangular piece, which I've tried to work hard, and we'll see in a minute if it's hard enough. But there's a slip arrangement on this, so this allows us to adjust the time. Basically, this pinion needs to slip, so rather this pinion being locked on here tight, it's essentially going to slip on the arbor. And the way this works is that there's a little pin on this pinion, and there's also a little pin on just this single collet. The collet on the back, or the collar on the back, is plain. And essentially what we'll do now is try and assemble this. So I've just gone off and positioned this into the right place, so that's why that one's locked on there. This is in the right position.
That feels quite fairly loose on there. So I've got a nice fit. I reamed this, got a nice fit, and it does spin nicely. So then next on here is this large brass wheel. Just let me get this the right way around. Okay, and there is a hole on this, which, and this is the moment of truth, I've not actually tried to assemble this yet. So this should just fit. And it does. Okay, so happy days. Okay, so that's fitting there with the pin. So now you can see that actually the whole thing's rotating. That pin is locking that slip washer onto the pinion. And then next on is this triangular piece. Now this is the bit that I'm most nervous about, because here we've gonna have to try, and obviously with it being domed, it's not quite as easy to align. I'm gonna now try and fit this collar on. Okay, here we go. So this collar's going on now. Now I've got to try and align this. So I might do this off camera now, because I think this is going to take a few seconds, but essentially got to get this pin now into the triangular piece so that the collar and the triangular piece are locked together, and the pinion and this slip washer are all locked together, and then obviously compress the whole thing together. Oop, yeah, off camera job, because now this one's unclipped. Okay, and there's the arrangement for the slipping pinion. So you can see there, you probably can't see, but essentially that is slipping on, and the actual rubbing mating surfaces of this triangular washer against the flat washer. So that's how that arrangement is working. So we'll mount this to the clock now and just see how it looks. Okay, so there is the Takeoff arbor mounted with the slip washer action in place. And a happy accident has come out of all this. I originally read the plans and made another lantern pinion, because it says so you can use a lantern pinion, basically a mirror of that one there. And I decided, actually, once I'd made the lantern pinion, that it didn't look very nice and that a proper pinion would look much better. And instead of wasting that lantern pinion, I actually replaced it for the one that was on here. So actually that is the new lantern pinion now on the second wheel, or centre wheel. And what I did differently this time is on this one here, I used 1.3mm trundles, and actually 1.4mm trundles are actually more like what's in the plans, and I couldn't get them a year ago or 6 months ago when I made that. And what's happening now, all of a sudden, my problems have gone away, in that the escapement is working perfectly as it should, a locking motion on both sides. And also, I've gone back to the original steel weight as per the plans, instead of having to use this huge brass weight with extra weight on top. And I think what's happening now is that the 1.4mm trundles are causing a better rolling action and a more even distribution of that force over this centre wheel. I think this one actually was locking up a little bit because of the smaller trundles, and I thought if anything the bigger ones would cause that, but I think actually this nice little accident has really helped. In this video we condensed many hours of making a clock hand into a few minutes, and we started out by cutting the profile on a CNC machine and then removing that with a piercing saw. It was then time to take off all those burrs, starting with some quite heavy duty files and then finishing off with needle files, and this took quite a number of hours. We then started lapping the hand, and we used various grades of wet and dry, and then finally we finished off getting a really high polish using some diamond paste. And this was really important because the final blue in will really be dictated by the final finish of the hand. And here you can see, giving it a good clean in isopropyl alcohol,
and from this point we weren't to touch the hand. It was finally cleaned with some Rodico just to remove those final traces of any oils and any final debris. And then it was on to the heat treatment and the bluing. I took a sheet of brass with some brass shavings, preheated those to get a nice even distribution of heat, and now no matter what position I put the camera in or the lighting, I just could not get this to show on camera, but it was really obvious, clear as day, going from straw to a blue, deep blue purple colour, and once that was achieved, it was a case of quenching it in oil. And once again, the camera picks up some gradients in that colour, but I can assure you that the final hand is a lovely, uniform blue-purple colour all over. So, just wanted to show you the building of the glass tank for the top of the clock. So this is going to sit right on the top. I wasn't intending to build this myself, but the quotes that I was getting for crystal clear fish tanks was really expensive, and despite me telling them all what I wanted it for, they were all wanting to use 10mm glass, which was just too thick. So instead we're going to build this ourselves, and I've elected to use this low viscosity glass bonder, which is UV glue. I was really worried about how well this would hold, but I've got this cheap, really cheap 15-watt light. I think I paid that about £10 for that second hand, and the bond is incredibly strong. That's just one piece, so I'm not going to wiggle it too much, but certainly when I've got all of the corners on, I think this is going to be really strong. It needed about 1 minute. The instructions said 30 seconds to 45 seconds. That was with a slightly higher powered UV. So I've gone for just over a minute, actually, about 1 minute and 10 seconds. Okay, so we've got the glass box together, and we've just got a slight issue. I said that this side panel wasn't straight enough. It's actually too short, tiny bit, which is why there's a tiny bit of a lip there, but like I say, it's got to be upside down. But it also wasn't square, and there's a small gap. Oop, I don't think I can focus on that. There's a small gap at the bottom there. So I think what we can do is we can put some UV glue on that, push it down, and then cure it, and hopefully it'll hold. And there's the final display case, looking really lovely and clear. It's used that low iron glass, and also the UV bonding adhesive is super strong and absolutely crystal clear. And obviously you've got the advantage of no silicone joints, which is really nice as well. So this is for the backboard. We've got some maple backed veneer, hardwood veneer, and an MDF sheet for the backboard. The price of the solid backboard would be really expensive, so we're going to try and use this, never used it before, but this Evo Stick multi-purpose impact contact adhesive. So we're going to get spreading that on. So here's the bottom board, and here's the sensor, which I've drilled through, and then we've just made this little adapter. It just makes it look a little bit nicer on the bottom board. So that screws in there, and then that screws in on the top, and then obviously two-handed I'll thread that through, lift it up, thread it through, and then that's holding the centre in position as well.
which is why I think maybe a Brendan Johnson goal.
Pretty amazing moment now, because after all those years of hard work, finally dismantled and fully polished as best I can all the clock parts, and it's time now to start building them up. So we're going to start off building some of the bits, small bits on the table, and then obviously we'll move over to the clock and start building them up in the cabinet. Well, that's the final clock, all finished. Couple of last bits to do. Just increase the weight with a nicer brass weight at the bottom. But essentially that's it all nicely running. I've silvered the dials, which has gone quite nicely. I like the look of those. Bit of a contrast. Could do with perhaps some blue screws. I am really pleased with how this has turned out. So thank you for watching. It's been a heck of a journey. I think 4 or 5 years now in the making. So thanks again for watching, and let's see what the next project brings. See you soon. Thanks.